Hey, welcome to Fan Made, the show where we talk to some of the most exciting names in the sports and entertainment world who are just diehard passionate fans just like me and you. We're going to break down some of their best game memories, their history behind the game, and being a fan, and some of their favorite traditions around going to games. I'm your host, Luke Porco, and you probably know our guest from TikTok and Instagram, where he's usually the one interviewing people. But today we're going to flip the script to interview him. Let's welcome Alex Day. Alex, so great to have you on, man.
Hey, I appreciate it, Luke. I appreciate it a lot. Excited to be here.
Yeah, no problem. Since we know you're always at a different stadium each time when we interview you, my first question to you is what was the first game that you remember attending just as a fan?
My first game attending as a fan, and I have some early memories going to Old Yankee Stadium with my dad, but
Nice.
so I want to an early Yankee game, but I don't really have like a first big memory of going to game. Like I know I went to games before some of my first real memories, but Yankee games were the ones that my dad was taking me to when I was a kid.
Nice. Yeah, and I'm sure, growing up like 90s and stuff like that, you got to see, I'm sure you got to see some great teams towards
Oh
the
yeah.
late 90s World Series Yankee teams. And
Oh yeah. Bernie was my favorite player growing
oh
up.
yeah, he's one of the best. Love Bernie. And yeah, and so you mentioned you went to go to games with your dad. And did your dad like kind of like raise you, I'm assuming, to be a Yankee fan and fan of like Knicks and Rangers and
Yeah. So I would say like when I first started becoming a sports fan, which is, my first memories it was Yankees, Giants, Rangers. It was those three. My dad really wasn't an NBA fan. So at first I was actually growing up, like maybe up until I was 8 or 9, I was actually a Lakers fan because Shaq was my favorite player. There wasn't really that much NBA on in my house. And then I realized, and I think this is true for so many kids who grew up in New York, where they have to be defending their teams growing up because you got some Mets fans, some Yankee fans, some Giants fans, some Jet fans. All my friends growing up, and still to this day, so many of them are Mets and Jets fans. And that bummed me out a lot. So I wanted to have a team to root for with my friends. So I became a Knicks fan. I became a Knicks fan, mid 2000s around Marbury and then into
Mhm.
the Amari era, into Melo.
Yep.
So for me, I would say, truly day one on Yankees, Giants, Rangers. And then a little bit later, I became a Knicks fan. And, at this point, I've been a diehard Knicks fan for, 15, 20 years. But, that came a little bit after the other three.
Nice. Yeah, I had similar, got into the Knicks like mid 2000s, I want to say as well. But yeah, right. Same with me, Yankees to beginning. And yeah, like, and you do remember like going to those games and to like being an adult now, like, those memories always stay with you. But you mentioned earlier about like how you have some good memories like growing up for games. Well, did you ever get to like witness any like, records broken or any championships or any like, kind of like major games that you got to witness?
Yep. The biggest one is still my phone background to this day, even though I was a senior in high school. And at this point, I've been out of college for 7, 8 years, but I was at Super Bowl 46.
Wow.
Giants beating the Pats. Not the first one, but
Yeah, the second
the
one. Yep.
Manning to Manningham.
Hmm.
So
Yep.
that
Wow.
that was that was a highlight of really my life, and the highlight for me as a sports fan, not just my favorite team winning the Super Bowl,
Mhm.
but as the first Giants Super Bowl with Eli was probably, of course, that much more unexpected, that much more special. But the fact that I got to be there for the second one it still gives me goosebumps today.
Yeah, especially just getting to go to a Super Bowl, let alone being your team winning. Like I'm sure I'm sure people like it's just like you're very lucky to have that memory because not too many people will ever get to say they've gotten to
No,
do
I
that.
completely, and I haven't, even since I've been working with overtime, I haven't, that was really that was a big deal for my family at the time, and I remember my mom thinking like, this is such an irresponsible decision. they better win. Like they better win if you're doing this. Like I remember those conversations.
Yeah, good thing they did, because I'm sure if you flew back, Mama Day wouldn't be too happy. Would be like, really?
Not at all. At
Yeah,
all.
so going back to your work with Overtime, like you got to every day seems like you're coming out with a different viral video, like with some crazy fan. You mentioned, like I saw the one a few weeks back with a Devils fan who's giving you some grief. What are like just some like some fan bases or even some stadiums where you've had like some of like the best or craziest like fans that you've like experienced?
Yeah. So I think, and this is so biased, but New
Mhm.
York sports fans to me, or actually, I'll keep it more broad. I think East Coast sports fans are a different breed than in other parts of the country. I think, there are diehard fans all over, but it just pro sports means something different to people in the Northeast, I find, in the same way that, you go into the South and
Mhm.
college football means something
Yeah,
entirely different there. I've done a lot with New York sports fans, so I'm biased in that way. But I'm trying to think some of the other crazy fan bases. Huh. Uh, Texas fans,
UT.
UT. It was one of my first months working at Overtime, and I was doing a shoot. We were doing a show, and it was for a Texas Oklahoma game, and that still to this day was one of the best games I ever went to. But Texas fans were intense.
Yeah,
Those were some very serious fans.
yeah. Yeah, I could see that. I've obviously never been down there, but just from watching on like when they have college game day over there, those Longhorns fans don't mess around. And
No, not at all.
tip my cap to them. But yeah, since so you mentioned like Texas being one of like the best like out of state like fan bases you've been to, and like arena. You mentioned arenas in like the
Yeah,
Northeast, but I'm gonna switch it up for a little bit. Talk about like what's your favorite, like going a little more like rapid fire questions here, like
yeah,
about
yeah,
like
yeah.
favorite, teams and games and experiences with that. But like just based on New York alone, what's your favorite stadium out of all the, not counting like if just counting the ones you've been to, like if there aren't any.
So only New York or not just New
It
York?
could be like I just figured
Yeah.
New York because you've been there the most, but it could be
I
outside
think
of.
I think the energy in the Garden is
Yeah,
really special, and I think for football, I'll go with the Big House, Michigan. That I mean,
yeah.
like 110,000 people, and that had my jaw on the ground.
Yeah, I'm sure it is. I'm an Ohio State fan, but but yeah, no, even I gotta give them credit too. And when you're at games, What's your favorite go to like food and drink? Like when you like, let's say you're at a baseball game or basketball, hockey, football, whichever. What's your like go to?
Luke, it has to be chicken tenders and fries. Like I'll get a
Yankees.
burger. I'm someone who will eat anything. I'm the least picky eater, but tenders and fries, that's my staple. I'll
Um,
get I'll get a beer. I'm not, I drink at games, but I very rarely am, because whether I'm there for work or even if I'm not
yeah,
for work, like I'll drink at games, but I'll get like I'll have one or two Bud Lights. There's definitely the exceptions. Sometimes I don't at all. Sometimes I have, you know,
yeah.
a couple more than that. But I would say typically I'll get chicken tenders and fries, a Bud Light, and then I'll get a second or maybe third drink a little bit later.
Nice. Yeah, man. They got, especially Yankee Stadium, those chicken tender buckets with the French fries.
Got to get the bucket.
Go to. And yeah, so what's the favorite player you love watching live? Like in any sport, really?
My childhood hero, as for many kids who are my age and grew up in New York, like it'll always be Derek Jeter. Uh,
Yeah.
that's like the white whale for me. That I would love to interview Derek Jeter. So I'll say growing up Jeter, and then I'll say also Victor Cruz. Victor Cruz for me was that same year where the Giants went to the Super Bowl in 2012. I remember like I went to the Giants Jets game with my friends in high school, and it was Christmas Eve, and it's Christmas Eve or Christmas Day, and
Yeah, I think it was Christmas Eve, if
Chris
I remember
and,
correctly.
and, and Cruz had the
Hmm.
99
Yep, yep.
touchdown,
Yeah, I
and I
remember that one.
just like my head popped right off my shoulders.
Yeah, no, that kind of like kicked it off because right after that they just went on that run in the playoffs.
Of
And
course.
yeah, that was an exciting couple months after that game. And hypothetically, if you could go to any game, like whether it be any sport, baseball, football, basketball, hockey, whichever, and you could bring three people with you. They could be famous, they could just be, people you know personally, anybody. If you had three people to bring to a game, who would it be and why?
Hmm. Okay, let me think about it. You know what? Realistically,
Realistic or
realistically,
not realistic?
I would say realistically, I'd bring my two closest buddies from growing up, Jacob and John Joe, and my dad, because I feel very fortunate that I get to go to a lot of games for work, and it really doesn't feel like work. And there have been a lot of times where I've gone to games with people who I'm meeting for the first time, and it's you realize how important it is to be going with your friends. I did a thing with a company for Rangers Devils a couple weeks ago. And I got they handed me money to get tickets. It was a credit. And instead of using that in a couple different games, I took two of my closest buddies to the game. Us three went. I was like this is more fun if going with your friends is a lot more fun than going with random people. So yeah, I'll go with my buddies Jacob and John Joe and my dad.
Nice. That's a great answer.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and you know what? Because you're right though. Because sometimes when you just go with your buddies or family, whatever, you're gonna have a good time. You know what to expect. Like, so I feel like it even it may sound cool to go with like famous athlete or celebrity. Like you said, like they're at the end of the day they're just random people. You don't know if you're really gonna vibe with them or click like that. But it's a good answer choosing your
I
buddies and your dad.
Yeah, I think also if the famous people are sports fans, then I'm open
Yeah.
to it.
Hmm.
But like, there's nothing worse than being at a game with someone where, unless you're on a date or something where you have to
Yeah.
explain everything, nothing worse
Hmm.
than that, where you just want to kick back and watch.
Exactly. Or you get people who are just like, pretend like don't like sports and are just gonna be like that
Yeah,
guy. Like, oh yeah, I don't watch sports. I don't get, what's going on here. It's just to be that. So yeah, it's always safe to go with your friends and
yeah.
your family when it comes to that. And when you go like if you were to talk to somebody who wasn't a fan or like was getting to go to a game for the first time, what are some like tips or like traditions that you like to do or that you would kind of recommend to a person like
For someone going to a game for
yeah,
the
it could be like going to a Yankee baseball game or like in general, just like what are
yeah,
like some
I think I think if it's your first time going to any stadium arena, whether you want to do it before the game or in the middle of the game, halftime, whatever. Once you enter, do a lap. Like I always try to do a lap in the concourse just to feel like yes, there's the game and there's the seats and stuff, but you're also going to a new building, so I always like to see what's going on at that stadium, at that arena, if they have any. I don't know. Like every franchise has things that they're proud of that you don't even realize that they're proud of if they're not one of your favorite teams. So I like checking that stuff out too.
nice. Yeah, no, I agree. It's always good to just kind of drink it in, especially it's your first time being there. But and one of my last questions is going to be because I know you mentioned your white whale would be to one day interview Derek Jeter,
Yeah.
and hopefully one day that can happen. But what's somebody you've have interviewed that you're just like kind of like blown away by that you got to the chance to interview?
Uh, Interviewing Gronk that was a big deal for me. I was really excited about that. Interviewing Stephen A. Smith as well, and that was a tough interview to do just because he's such a tough dude to talk to.
Yeah.
Those two stand out to me. as two of the bigger names for sure. Even before, I used to be a producer. I wasn't doing content creation, and I used to work in baseball. Getting to interview Mariano Rivera that was bucket list. Like that was incredible. Even if he didn't really he doesn't really give answers or anything, but just
Yeah,
talking to Mariano Rivera,
exactly.
you know.
Hmm.
So I'll say those. I'll also I have to throw it out there because this guy isn't half as big as the others, but one of the most fun interviews I've ever done was a couple months ago with Leonard Fournette.
Oh, nice.
And to this day, that's my guy. So shout out Lenny. That was a really fun interview.
Nice. Yeah, that was fun. This has been a fun interview. And Alex, thanks so much for your time today. But before you go, just one last thing. Just if there's anything you want to plug or, tell people where people can find you on social media. And yeah,
Yeah.
floor is yours.
Yeah. You can find me on Instagram and TikTok at Overtime Day, DAY. I'm also on Twitter too. There's a little underscore between overtime and day. So yeah, follow me on there, and I post all my content on there on a pretty daily basis, depending on what time of year. So make sure to check me out there.
Yeah, there he is, Alex Day. He gave some great answers today. It was fun talking to him. And you could listen to this podcast on the YouTube Fan Made Podcast and follow us on social media. You can follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and yeah, and on YouTube as well. And yeah, and great talking to you, Alex. And hope to see you all again next time. And thanks again for listening to Fan Made Podcasts.
Appreciate it, Luke.